Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 116 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Joe Meade with me tonight. And, Joe, we're going to go over week 9 in the Big Ten for football. It was not one that really we're going to remember for a very long time. Very few huge games, but, potentially a couple of gateway games for some teams looking to do some damage later in the season. So, Joe, the way that this is working is that we're going to start with big noon kickoff, and that was in Bloomington. The Cinderella story of UCLA, 3-0 since they fired their coach going into the number 2 team in the country, and it seemed to be back to normal. Indiana 56, UCLA 6. The magic is over for the Bruins, and Indiana business as usual.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was over after the pick six, to be quite honest with you, Sean. I don't think this necessarily should take away from UCLA's three-game run. I just think Indiana is one of the best teams in the country, and UCLA is clearly a team that still has some very consistent struggles and gaping holes. And I think when you have a guy like Kirk Cignetti, who seemingly always loves to cover the spread, except against Michigan State last week, it's kind of an inevitable score, to be honest. Maybe you think that Indiana, it's pretty rare you blow out two teams by 50 in conference, but Kurt Cignetti is the unicorn of that.
Yep, they're only one team has a 50-point win in conference play. It's Indiana, and they have two of them. But in Indiana, a couple injuries on the defense. Aiden Fisher and Mikael Kamara both left the game. Both are expected to play against Maryland this next week, so nothing unfortunate there. Amaliava did play for UCLA here, but he was very ineffective, and they didn't even manage touchdowns. So this one was over really as soon as it started. All right, Joe, down we go to Outson, where Luke Fickell and Wisconsin were looking for their first win. Oregon was looking to avoid a banana skin here, and they did. Slow start for the Ducks, but final score 21-7. What an ugly game of football here, and a nice game from the running back Davidson with 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. But worrying here for Oregon.
I mean, to be honest with you, I think they just played not to lose, and clearly it worked. Between Davison and Whittington, I think Dan Lanning knew and Will Stein knew that, the one way you lose to Wisconsin is if you give them the ball in plus territory. And luckily for the Ducks, they avoided it. No turnovers on the day. So I look at that and I think, Sean, Wisconsin's just offense clearly garners no respect around the league. I think their defense is playing their absolute hearts out. I think they could have easily surrendered over 50 to an offense like Ohio State's, and that didn't happen. You could have said Ryan Day might have taken it easy on Luke Fickell, but they also held Michigan to 24, Oregon to 21. I think Wisconsin, the fact that they're probably one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, I think of the worst teams in the Big Ten, Wisconsin's defense by far is the best unit of these basement seller teams. Oregon, I'm not too worried quite yet. I think they had a good response last week against Rutgers, and they do have the bye week. So I think they were just limping toward the bye week, and then obviously that big game at Kinnick in 2 weeks. So I don't think this is indicative of a pattern, Sean, for the Ducks. So I think they should be okay. I think, again, their game plan was just to not lose, and luckily for them, they got away with it.
All right, let's stay on the West Coast, Joe. Illinois went out there looking for a big win on the road at Washington, and it was the Huskies' offense that finally showed up in a big game. Damon Williams, almost 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. Coleman had a touchdown. Boston had a touchdown. And this was a big gateway game for a potential fourth team from the Big Ten in the college football playoff, and Washington passes this test with flying colors.
Yeah, Sean, and I kind of suspected that a Jed Fish offense wouldn't go back-to-back weeks with stunningly bad offensive performances. And like I said during the Michigan game, I thought they were pretty efficient. I thought Michigan's defensive line gave them a lot of issues, and Demond made some two really poor decisions. This game was exactly what you wanted from him. 26 to 33, 280 yards, also gets 66 yards on the ground. Denzel Boston, proving why he's one of the best receivers in the conference. I think he should be a day one or day two NFL draft pick, an early day two, I might add as well. And Jonah Coleman, another 100 plus total yard game between rushing and passing. So I think this is the combo. This is the combo. I mean, sorry, this is the trio that I've touted as one of the best in the country, and I think they proved it again. I know Illinois' defense isn't all that. I think their offense is certainly good, but Luke Altmaier, 2 interceptions, that's just not going to get it done. QBR wasn't great either. I don't think their run game really gave Washington fits it all. And the fact Washington started this game, Sean, started this game hot, kind of never really put them behind the eight ball. You don't really see Brett Bielema teams play great from behind. They normally have to get the lead first and then, kind of make the game really ugly and make the other team make mistakes. But Washington, in this case, front ran and they pretty much kept them at a distance most of this game.
Yeah, Illinois' defense to me is starting to become a real problem. Um, they have given up a lot of points to all the good teams that they've played. Between Indiana, Ohio State, who fully just chewed that clock in the second half and still was at 38, I believe, and Washington with 42 here. The defense is holding them back, and until then, they had probably lost to the two best teams in the country. And I don't think there's any shame in losing at Washington, but they were not in any of the three losses. It's not like you could blame one play, one call, one unlucky break. They were thoroughly beaten 3 times. So disappointing from Illinois' point of view. And from Washington's point of view, they were unlikely to lay an egg a third straight time offensively. And luckily for them, it's always easier to get it going early and keep it going than to, find something in the middle of the game. So Washington moves to 6-2. They have a path to the playoff. It's a narrow one, but they have a path. And another team that is in a pretty similar situation, Joe, with a rivalry slate in the last week. That if they win that, there's a chance they make the playoff. That's your Michigan Wolverines. They moved to 6-2 with a 31-20 victory over Michigan State in East Lansing. Obviously, a lot of noise from the Spartans side after this one, Joe. But thoughts on this one?
To me, it's kind of the same theme that Oregon, believe it or not, had against Wisconsin. I think Michigan in the first half tried to be too cute. I think the prime example was their first drive following the fumble recovery by Jimmy Rolder. Michigan's second goal at the 3 yard line. Why are they passing twice? That doesn't even make sense, unless you had some Underwood parlay or whatever. I mean, it was ridiculous. But I think Michigan in the first quarter uh, ran the ball really well, and they kind of went away from it. They went away from the easy passing game too. I think they made it a little more complicated for Underwood and Michigan State. Say what you want about this team, Joe Rossi being on the sideline down for the box. That defense, I think, forced 6 or 7 punts. That's something they didn't do that against Indiana. They might not have done that against Indiana, UCLA, USC, and Nebraska combined. So, really good job by the MSU defense. I think their offense and Brian Lindgren really let them down. I think the pass protection was not great, but I also think they were too heavily reliant on long developing plays. And I also think, they really need to pounce on Michigan in that second quarter when they stalled. They had to win the middle eight, and they just got destroyed in the middle eight, surprisingly, Sean. They were down 10-7. They had 2 drives to take the lead with pretty favorable plus 35 field position, and they couldn't convert any of those into points. And then Michigan, the game was pretty much over after that offside. Now, we could debate that all day long. To me,
It
there
was
was no
offside,
guarantee.
I think.
Yeah. To me, whether you think it or not doesn't matter. The way MSU's offense played, you can't tell me that the offense was going to go 60 yards and score. So, to me, Michigan's run game is very good. I'm a little concerned. I did hear some rumblings. Justice Haynes re-aggravated an injury. That's something to monitor. Whether I think we're recording Monday here, so that's something we're gonna have to monitor throughout the week, and probably throughout the season. Hearing it might be really bad, but other than that, Sean, Michigan gets to 6-2, and this was probably their last real hurdle before Ohio State. I don't think any of their next 3 games are challenging. And if you're screaming from the top, if you're a Spartan fan, to fire Jonathan Smith, your lucky day might be following a Minnesota loss on Saturday because teams have been firing coaches entering the bye, and Michigan State's bye is November 8th. So November 2nd, if that game in Minneapolis doesn't go their way, all eyes should be on that.
And we're recording this Monday night, Joe. It is going to go out as soon as we're done here. So very very low chance that we get some major news before it goes out. But yeah, I think there's a real good chance that there's a vacancy at Michigan State soon. But But from my point of view, I think Michigan beat Michigan State by bettering their strength. We've talked about Michigan State's front seven being surprisingly above average, and it was just their secondary kept getting torched. Michigan didn't even have 100 yards passing here. They gashed them on the ground, which they did to Washington the week before, too. So between Haynes and Marshall, you've got yourself a really good running back room, and if you can get both of those two to the Ohio State game effective, you're going to have a shot there. But from Michigan State's point of view, it seems to be the writing seems to be on the wall here. I don't think it's a surprise, really, that their offense looked better when their backup came in and they were chasing the game late. And I think Giles is a talented quarterback, but at some point, you'd have to think that, knowing that the coach and the quarterback came over in a package deal, that letting one of them go would probably mean the other goes as well. So tough days ahead for Michigan State, and Michigan gets through the gateway. They're going to, we've been talking about it for a couple weeks now, Joe. Michigan just needs to get to that Ohio State game with something on the line other than nothing. I know they won last year with that, but if they can get to hosting Ohio State with 2 losses and likely a chance in the playoff on the line, my goodness, that game's going to be fun to watch. But, all right, as we move on, Nebraska hosts Northwestern, and it's the Cornhuskers that get away with a narrow 28-21 victory. Joe, was this more of a lucky that you got out of there with a win from Nebraska, or you giving them credit for getting the job done?
I'm going to do the politician, do a little bit of both. I think Northwestern posed real problems, particularly at the edge position for Nebraska's O-line, which has really struggled. I think Preston Stone kind of did Northwestern a disservice, as did the O-line to an extent. I don't think they did an ample job protecting him, but to outgain Nebraska and still lose has to be really agonizing for the Wildcats. I don't think Dylan Raiola by any means played a good game. I thought he was timid a lot. I thought he missed some throws, and I thought, frankly, he was checking down a lot. And frankly, they got away with it. Let's call it what it is, Sean.
Northwestern had a chance to at least tie the game late. They had it may have been to take the lead, but Raiola has decreased in his effectiveness this year, I think.
Yeah, and I'm going to attribute a lot of that to the offensive line as well. I think a lot of people do the fad thing and try to criticize Dylan Raiola. Certainly, some of it is on him, but the offensive line is really getting this guy.
They don't really have an effective run game either.
No. Yeah. I think Emmett Johnson, what's crazy is I think all their skill players, to Emmett Johnson, to Raiola, to the receivers, are all really good. They're just not being protected enough by that line. And defensively, it's so clear to me that if you have any semblance of a run game, you're going to move the ball on this team. And you're going to say, oh, well, it's all chunk runs. Chunk runs still count, guys. I don't know why that's such a defense, because 56 yard runs count, and 40 to 80 yard runs certainly count in football without a penalty. So this is a problem Nebraska's had. Certainly they had it against Minnesota. And frankly, based on what happened in a game we're going to recap pretty soon, I wouldn't be as encouraged. I'm not very encouraged by Nebraska going into this matchup game with USC.
And Joe, you see Nebraska does have 2 losses there. Is there a path for them to the playoff? I would be leaning towards no.
No, I don't think Penn State losing really did them a disservice. If they beat USC, let's face it, USC will be a 3 or 4 loss team. Your best win can't be against a 3 or 4 loss team.
Yeah, and the reason why we're propping up these other 2 loss teams like Washington and Michigan as a path, they've got a definite playoff team on their schedule, and presuming that they were to stay at 2 losses, that would include a win against them, and Nebraska does not have that.
And deepest apologies, Sean. Since he does continue to win out, which I suspect they won't, but if they do, that could really help them. So if you're a Nebraska fan, I'd be pulling hard for Cincinnati, but
that's frankly the wild card in things. But I think Cincinnati's the 3rd best team in the Big 12, and I think it's going to be Texas Tech and BYU for that championship game. So, the path there is for Cincinnati to be really good, and that's not really anything Nebraska can do about that. But like you said, I don't know if that's a realistic thought. All right,
No.
let's go back to the state of Indiana. Rutgers picks up their first Big Ten win of the year, and they move to 4-4 with a game-winning field goal against Purdue. Um, Joe, in terms of getting to a bowl-eligible position, Rutgers absolutely needed this, and they got it. Other than that, not much to go over.
Yeah, I think the word you keep using is gateway, Sean. This is definitely a gateway game for Rutgers to get to a bowl game. I think with the remaining four games, there's two they might be favored in, which are Maryland at home and Penn State at home. Those are the two they're going to have to win, barring a colossal upset over Illinois or the Buckeyes. But uh, for Purdue, you can't help but feel for them. I thought Anthony Kaliakmanis had one of the best games he's ever had, 359. I know he missed some targets.
Yeah, only on
I know
19
he
completions, too.
Yeah, but KJ Duff, 241 yards. Oof, this Purdue secondary is getting torn apart. I feel bad for guys like Ryan Brown and Devin Mockabee clearly giving it their all. Malachi Singleton as well. Uh, it's just really tough because I think Purdue does deserve to get a Big Ten win here. They've been playing their hearts out. Uh, and frankly, I don't think it's going to come. Barring they're not going to be favored in any of their remaining games. I thought this was their chance. I think they knew that in a way. Led for most of this game, and then it's Rutgers with the backbreaking score late to get over the hurdle. But to me, Rutgers did what a bowl eligible team does. They beat a team that's mostly significantly worse than them and younger than them. So that's a really important thing to do for Rutgers and for Purdue. I know they're likely to go 2-10, but this team is so much improved from last
It
year
really is.
that I think Coach Odom, should he keep Ryan Brown, I think if he reloads in the portal, develops more of the younger talent, I think they could have something next year to be a bowl eligible team.
And if they were to play Wisconsin right now, I think they would win, regardless of where it is. I think they're very much ahead of the Badgers. They're competing. They have had good offensive games. Now they have had some stinkers too, but it just seems like with Purdue and their new coach, like next year will be where we start to judge them, just because they just have an incomplete roster and they're down some injuries on the defense that is already lacking a little bit, and unfortunately, you need a little bit more than that to win in this league. All right, Joe, the last game here of the week. Perhaps the most interesting score line of the weekend. Yes, that is a 41 next to Iowa. The Hawkeyes take down Minnesota 41-3, a complete 180 from the week before for PJ Fleck and the Gophers. Joe, Iowa gets 2 touchdowns from the defense and the special teams, and Mark Gronowski continues to they continue to convert in the red zone, and Iowa is 6-2 with an offense that can put up some points.
Yeah, this is the most stunning result I've seen in the month of October in terms of scoreline. Indiana stunned me in September with their utter demolition of Illinois, who I thought was probably a top 20-ish team at the time. Clearly, that's not true now. But I thought Minnesota, Sean, was a good team.
Yeah.
I still think they can be because Cal. I know they lost that sticker to Virginia Tech. They lost that game on the West Coast, kind of without Darius Taylor. Then they lose to the defending national champs, the number one team in the country, UK, and they shut down, but I think still a really talented Nebraska team. So I go into this game thinking this is going to be a close, typical Big Ten West game. Oh my gosh, it was anything but. Drake Lindsey, QBRs in the single digits. I rarely see that. No TDs, 3 picks. This is a game Phil Parker. This is just a Phil Parker masterclass. And now that you couple that in with Tim Lester, the offensive coordinator, finally finding balance between passing and Mark Gronowski running along with Kamari Moulton. I'll put it to you this way, Sean. Iowa at 6-2 wouldn't necessarily rule them out of the playoff. If they beat Oregon and they beat USC, we should have some conversations. I know we're way down the line. We're way ahead of that, but in theory, it's possible.
Yeah, just when you think you can write Iowa off, Gronowski's
And Kirk
injured.
Ferrett's off, quite frankly.
Yes, right. Just when you think they have used all of their rope, Gronowski's injured. He's not very good when he comes back from injury. Here they are again, going to win 8 or 9 games, and it's going to be business as usual. Maybe if they get really hot, they could get to. I mean, they've got the Big Ten championships before, but that was more of a factor of the divisions. But I think they're probably the fifth or sixth best team in the Big Ten. They're just consistent. They're hard to beat. They have one loss at home, and it's to Indiana, and their other losses to Iowa State on the road in a rivalry game by a field goal. So, look, Iowa State has kind of fallen off a little bit, but still, I think a win against Oregon and Iowa shoots up this rankings and into some of the CFP projections, because that's just how this thing works. They seem to have a couple options on offense. When was the last time that outside of the tight end position that we saw that we've seen at Iowa? Moulton looks good. Gronowski's a dual threat. He's hitting his throws when he needs to, and they're really impressive here. I thought we thought this game probably on a neutral is a toss up. Iowa was favored by a little bit because they were at home, and this was 38-point win for Iowa. There was a time where that we would have thought that was impossible, but Iowa moves on. They're 6-2, and they've got a chance to do something special this year. All right, Joe, that is all we have from today. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.